No thing has become more true to me recently than what is associated with the idea of you can have two men with the exact same circumstances and the exact same happenings within their life, and yet one can be completely miserable and one can be joyous and content. It matters not what is seen from the outside, what is perceived by the outward world. The only thing that matters is what one experiences of this thing and what one does not. And to make matters more complicated, the one man who is miserable can inform you and convince you that he is joyous and content. Yet we will never really know what it is like to be that man and to experience things the way he experiences them. He is the sole arbiter of what the thing is like to him, and he is ultimately the judge and jury of whether that life is of value or not. But he is also the one who tells us what it's like, and it is nearly impossible to refute his declaration. So what if we see a bookshelf in someone's house? How can we apply this logic to the perception of this thing? We see the bookshelf, and it is filled with interesting books, things to read for days, aspects of life we have never considered. It appears from the look of this bookshelf that this person is very interesting and has read many fascinating things, and most likely has some great ideas based on these readings. But isn't this just an assumption based on the appearances we previously referenced? Aren't we already aware that the perception of this thing tells us little of the truth and reality? Isn't it just as likely that the first man we speak of who owns this bookshelf considers it as a useful thing to have solely because it serves some type of function that he has become estranged from, or one he has never familiarized himself with in the first place? He has come to understand through perception of others and their lives that the shelf is something which you use to place books once you read them. He sees it in the houses of other supposedly learned men, and so wanting to be like them, he puts one in his home as well. He now has access to a wealth of material, but in actuality, he hasn't read or looked at the books for years, other than for the opportunity to show them off to others. Since the books in the shelf never had a purpose that grew out of his life in the first place, they are now being utilized in a way that is alienated and separated from the life he lives. This is the man of whom we first mentioned who is most likely miserable and not pleased with life. Let us now compare to the man who is more joyous, and how the use of the bookshelf came about. He is one for which the books and the shelf served a necessary purpose in the growth of his organic being. It was a spawning, a birth out of something essential. The use of books came from the thirst for knowledge, the yearning to know and expand. And so since the books started to compile and they needed a place to go, he bought a bookshelf to help organize them. And he eventually found that the bookshelf helped him see what was there, what was needed to be reread and reviewed. He could use the books as a whole and see how they all strung together and worked as a unity. It was all in service of his life and his being, not the other way around, where he was doing things in service of the bookshelf and its books. But the other strange thing about the second man is that he could easily part from the shelf and the books if need be. If circumstances changed and he was no longer in need of them, or he could no longer keep them because new aspects of life began pressing on him, then he would leave them behind with a heavy heart. Although this would hurt, he would know that the books and the shelf came from necessity, and just as equally, leaving them behind may be part of a newfound necessity. The bookshelf is required only as long as it is part of the life he is living, dying off when that thing is no longer a function of being. The case is very different for the first man. He has never needed it. It has never been essential. It has always served some type of secondary utility, a utility that did not derive from his situation. But surprisingly enough, unlike the joyous man, the miserable man will most likely hold on to the bookcase and books for longer than is required or helpful. He may in fact be more attached to these things than the other man, more desperate to keep them around long after their value has expired. For some strange reason, he will cling to these things even though they have never meant much to him in the first place. Perhaps it is because he never truly knew what they meant or what they were for, and so therefore he clings to the things which he has never had a connection with. He has a faint recollection that he has squandered his opportunity to connect with these things, and so he seeks desperately to hold on with the chance that he may, one day,